Hello again, my fiber friends. I'm ReRe, and this is Exploration Crochet, part of the Yarn Over Hook network. Today's episode is all about the one tool crochet cannot exist without: the hook. And I know, somebody out there is thinking it's just a hook. My friends, it is never just a hook. A crochet hook is a tiny piece of design history you can hold in your hand. It's material science, it's industrial manufacturing, it's global sizing chaos, it's ergonomics, it's fashion. And in at least one moment in history, it's literally wartime conservation policy. It's been carved from bone, polished from ivory, stamped out of steel, and later anodized in cheerful aluminum. And at least once, it was even turned matte black because wartime material restrictions made shiny a luxury. So today, we're going to follow the hook's evolution from carved and improvised tools to mass market aluminum to modern ergonomics. So grab your favorite hook, fancy, ergonomic, thrifted, or suspiciously unmarked, and let's time travel. If you could go back to crochet's early public era, mid-1800s patterns, lots of lace, you'd meet the first great truth of hook history. Hooks existed, but standardized sizing did not. Patterns basically said use a fine hook, shops sold whatever matched the thread, and the sizing system was often feels, or packaging, or a shopkeeper's memory. Vintage hooks can be adorable little chaos gremlins that may be labeled one thing while measuring differently. Letters and numbers changed across countries, brands, and eras. And if you've ever found a hook in a vintage tin with no size marking at all, congratulations! You've just met crochet history in the wild. Material-wise, early hooks were made from whatever could do the job: wood, bone, horn, ivory, or metal. Anything smooth enough to glide, strong enough not to snap, and shaped enough to snag a loop. But once crochet's popularity rises, especially around the mid-1800s, tool makers do what humans always do when a thing becomes popular. They start optimizing it. Suddenly, you get a whole world of engineering experiments. Hooks mounted into bone handles, wire handles, stamped brass handles, all these clever ways to attach the working end securely and make the tool nicer to use. And behind that story is a place name that shows up again and again in needlework tool history: Redditch, in England, a major center of needle manufacturing. When you've already got wire working skill, metalworking infrastructure, and a market hungry for precision tools, crochet hooks are just a natural cousin to needles. So the 1800s become the hook era, the era of we can do better by this. Better grip, better durability, better precision. Which brings us to a turning point: steel. Because steel lets you make very small hooks for lace and thread without snapping. And it lets manufacturers produce tools more consistently once scale kicks in. Now for a bit of hook history. During World War II, the U.S. government restricted materials needed for the war effort, including nickel used in plating. Nickel was placed over the steel to make it shiny. In response, Boy developed a black finish using a hot oxidized process on steel needlework tools, including crochet hooks. One collector source notes this shift beginning around mid-1942. So, if you ever find a steel hook that's matte black instead of shiny silver, you may be holding a war hook from the days when hooks were literally in stealth mode. But on the subject of steel, it introduced a new problem. The second you crochet fast, that hook wants to spin. Let's pause a minute to bust a myth. Ergonomic hooks are a modern invention. Early one-piece steel hooks were great for tiny lace work, but they had a problem. They could be slippery and rotate in your fingers. So in 1896, a quiet little design change solved a big annoyance. In that year, August Kippenberg received U.S. patent number 572809 for an integral crochet hook with a flattened portion, the ancestor of the modern thumb rest. It sounds small until you realize what it changed. The hook suddenly became easier to control, more comfortable for long sessions, while still being cheap to mass produce in a usable, consistent form. And here's a museum-grade detail. There's a record description of an Eagle patent crochet needle hook, silver size 5, made in Germany, that is linked to that flat pad patent era and noted as retailing for 5 cents. So that wasn't some luxury innovation for fancy crochet parlors. It was a kind of practical upgrade that reached ordinary hands. So, ergonomic hooks are a modern invention? No. It's a Victorian era quality of life upgrade that stuck. Historically, hook sizing is where crochet turns into a global comedy routine. Depending upon the era and where you live, you'll run into older UK numbering, US letters and numbers, Japanese numbering, and a whole zoo of brand-specific legacy systems. That's why millimeters became the modern anchor. Because when labels can't agree, the measurement at least stays honest. The history of hook sizing is basically the history of crochet going worldwide faster than tool labeling could keep up. Now jump into the early 20th century, when hooks become a true mass market product, and the craft itself shifts in a big way. By the 1920s, crochet moved from lace to garments. We needed bigger hooks for wool. So, enter aluminum. It was the space-age material of the time, light, colorful, and cheap. That one sentence is basically a whole era. Because once you're making sweaters and not just lace edgings, you're working with thicker yarns, bigger dimensions, and longer sessions. So suddenly weight and comfort matter a whole lot more. Aluminum fits that moment perfectly. Light in larger sizes, smooth, easy to manufacture, and ideal for the growing hobby market as manufacturers expanded hook lines and distribution. One key U.S. milestone that signals that mass market moment, 1917, when Boy, initially a needle company, introduced what later historians describe as the first complete line of crochet hooks made in America. That's more than just trivia. It's scale. Domestic production, wide distribution, and hooks becoming the kind of standardized product you could buy almost anywhere. And when tools scale, something funny happens. Crocheters start getting opinions, baby. Once hooks are everywhere, we start noticing everything. Geometry, head shape, throat depth, how a hook grabs yarn, how it splits yarn, how it moves through stitches. And that's the moment the hook stops being a hook and becomes my hook. Inline, when the hook head is more blocky and the throat often looks straighter so the head and shaft feel more uniform in width, versus tapered, when the hook head and throat taper more smoothly into the shaft, often with a slimmer appearance near the working area. These became real preferences, tied to brand lineages and what your hands learned first. Susan Bates is strongly associated with the inline hook style, and hook history sources note a mid 20th century patent tied to that shape. Because in crochet, your tool isn't just equipment, it's a relationship. And since I always try to be honest in my podcast, here's a trust tree moment. For years, I was a Susan Bates girl. I taught my daughter on Susan Bates. Loved that pointy head. Nobody could tell me there was anything better. My have times changed. A tiny rule of thumb: if you like precision and a firm catch, you may prefer inline. If you're more into glide and speed, you may prefer tapered. From the late 20th century into today, comfort stops becoming a bonus and becomes a feature. Brands start treating the hook like something you'll hold for hours, not just a stick with a bend. So you see the rise of thicker handles, molded grips, coatings, and better balance for long sessions. By the 1990s, companies like Clover are adding rubber grips, and suddenly a whole generation of crocheters is like, wait, you mean my hand doesn't have to suffer for my art? And the main takeaway is, this isn't new at all. It's the same old story in crochet history. Hands ask for a better tool, and the tool evolves. But modern crochet adds a twist. The hook doesn't just need to be comfortable, it also starts becoming desirable. We enter the era of hooks as objects of love: hand turned woods, glossy resin pours, limited editions, collector drops, and that classic debate: do I crochet with this or display it like jewelry? Now, don't get me wrong, fancy hooks have always been around: mother of pearl handles, gold plating, but now they are everywhere. And that's where Burls Crochet steps in as one of the most recognizable names in the ergonomic plus luxury lane. Their origin story is explicitly tied to hand pain. Inspired by a girlfriend who had hand cramps while crocheting, Harrison Richards began carving ergonomic hooks as a teenager and founded Furls in 2012. What made them stand out historically isn't that ergonomic hooks didn't exist. It's that Furls helped make ergonomic and luxury feel like one category. A thicker handle meant to keep the hand in a more neutral position, plus the "this is a beautiful object" factor. Resin, wood, metal aesthetics that feel like fountain pens for fabric people. You can also see that luxury ladder in the pricing. Their streamlined wood hooks are the most economical wooden line, typically between $19 and $24 depending upon the wood and hook. Their premium Alpha Series wooden hooks start around $86, and limited editions, some with burls, can go up to $149. In the long arc of hook evolution, Furls isn't a detour, it's continuity. Furls is not alone. Stroll through any vendor market at a fiber fest and you can easily sink a solid trip to Costco into one hook. Mason Burks, a premier Canadian luxury jewelry brand, created a 14-karat gold hook that sold in 2020 at auction for $510. And it is lovely. So, early hooks were personal and handmade. Industrial hooks became standardized and affordable. Ergonomic hooks centered on comfort. And now fancy ergonomic hooks combine comfort, craftsmanship, and luxury. Before we close, here's a helpful hint. If you find a vintage hook with no markings, measure the shaft in millimeters, then swatch. Use a hook gauge plate with holes, or if you don't have one, a drill bit set can be a good way to match diameters. And remember to measure where the stitches actually ride, usually just above the throat or near the thumb rest. Then swatch. because crochet has always had one final authority: fabric doesn't lie. And here's a bonus: a reminder that crochet touches everything. In the 1880s, Joseph Swan, a British early incandescent light developer, experimented with extruded cellulose in the context of filament research. And there are documented specimens of early artificial silk associated with swan that were crocheted by Lady Swan into textiles, which is the most crocheter thing imaginable. Science invents a thread for technology, and a crocheter says, "Cute! I'll use it to make lace." So next time someone says it's just a hook, you can smile and say, it's a tool shaped by history, industry, comfort, and aesthetics. And if you've got a mystery matte black steel hook in a tin somewhere, hit me in my socials. I'll gladly take it off your hands. If you've got a mystery hook in your stash, measure it in millimeters and tell me what you find, because I love a good hook story. If you need a hook size conversion chart, I'll leave a link to my yarn weight conversion chart, which also has millimeter hook size conversion information in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your stitch buddies. But most importantly, thank you for listening.